Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. You will hear in a couple of seconds John Roberts state, and Alito and others in the Supreme Court state categorically that they have to bring this case back to lower courts once again to decide what is an official and unofficial act. Trump is allowed to perform a speech. He did not break into the Watergate building. There was no crime. There was no predicate crime. He did everything through legal means, and they tried to say that it was this grandiose Byzantine plot to undermine the will of the people. But he did so legally. He had every right to do what he did. That's why the Supreme Court is going to decide what is official and what is unofficial. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Let's listen to the Honorable John Roberts.
So the Court of Appeals below, whose decision we're reviewing, said, quote, a former president can be prosecuted for his official acts because the fact of the prosecution means that the former president has allegedly acted in defiance of the laws. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true, but I want to underscore that the obligation of a president is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true as well, and that, I think, is the clearest statement of the court's holding, which is why it concerns me. As I read it, it says simply, a former president can be prosecuted because he's being prosecuted.
Well, I would not suggest that that's either the proper approach in this case or certainly not the government's approach. A prosecution does, of course, invoke federal criminal law. The allegations have to be presented to a grand jury, which votes upon the indictment.
Well, that's what I mean, shortly after that statement in the court, that court's opinion, that's what they said. But there's no reason to worry because the prosecutor will act in good faith, and there's no reason to worry because a grand jury will have returned the indictment. Now, you know how easy it is in many cases for a prosecutor to get a grand jury to bring an indictment, and reliance on the good faith of the prosecutor may not be enough in the some cases. I'm not suggesting here. So if it's tautological, and those are the only protections that the Court of Appeals below gave, and that is no longer your position, you're not defending that position, why shouldn't we either send it back to the Court of Appeals or issue an opinion making clear that that's not the law?
Well, I am defending the Court of Appeals judgment, and I do think that there are layered safeguards that the court can take into account that will ameliorate concerns about unduly chilling presidential conduct. That concerns us. We are not endorsing a regime that we think would expose former presidents to criminal prosecution in bad faith, for political animus, without adequate evidence. A politically driven prosecution would violate the Constitution under Waite versus United States. It's not something within the arsenal of prosecutors to do. Prosecutors take an oath, the Attorney General takes an oath. So well, I don't want to overstate Your Honor's concern with potentially relying solely on good faith. But that's an ingredient, and then the courts stand ready to adjudicate motions based on selective prosecution, political animus. This court relied on those very protections in the Vance case just 2 years ago.
But what concerns me is, as you know, the Court of Appeals did not get into a focused consideration of what acts we're talking about or what documents we're talking about because of its adoption of what you termed, and I agree quite correctly, as a tautological statement, because the fact of prosecution was enough to take away any official immunity. The fact of prosecution, they had no need to look at what courts normally look at when you're talking about a privilege or immunity question.
Well, I think I would take issue, Mr. Chief Justice, with the idea of taking away immunity. There is no immunity that is in the Constitution unless this court creates it today. There certainly is no textual immunity. We do not submit that that's the end of the story. United States versus Nixon wasn't a textually based case, neither was Nixon versus Fitzgerald. We endorse both of those holdings. But what is important is that no public official has ever had the kind of absolute criminal immunity that my friend speaks of, even with respect to the speech or debate clause. It's very narrow. It's focused on legislative acts. It's not focused on everything that a congressman does. And it responds to a very specific historical circumstance that basically involved the two other branches potentially harassing legislators and preventing them from doing their jobs. That's why it ended up in the Constitution. Nothing like that ended up in the Constitution for the presidents, and that's because one of the chief concerns of the framers was the risk of presidential misconduct. They labored over this. They adopted an impeachment structure that separated removal from office as a political remedy from criminal prosecution. This departed from the British model. The British model was you get impeached and criminally prosecuted and convicted in the same proceeding.
So the special counsel lawyer is saying, well, of course we would never be political. We're completely nonpartisan. We're apolitical. We've sworn an oath to protect the Constitution. Why would we ever usher in an era of political vitriol and animus and vengeance and retribution? We wouldn't indict and imprison Trump because we wanted to see our political party win. We would never do that. We're the Democratic Party. We can't even have a functioning primary. Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned in 2016 because they railroaded Bernie Sanders. And the truth about their political party came out in emails. And then, of course, that was a plot by another country to inform you of how despicable the DNC is to its own candidates. But John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, the Honorable Justice Roberts stated, why don't we just send this back to lower courts? We don't know what is an official or unofficial act. And simply because a lower court said that Trump committed crimes and he's not protected under the Constitution because he's been indicted doesn't mean that he's really not protected. Just because you indict Trump, that doesn't mean that he's above the law, that he has to be held accountable. This could be, I don't know, maybe political animus, overt, obvious political partisanship. They're interfering in 24. Everyone knows this. That's why his poll numbers are above Biden's. That's why he's going up in the polls as Biden's going down in the polls. If he was a true criminal, nobody would back him. But he isn't a criminal. He is allowed to perform a speech. The speech had literally nothing to do with criminal behavior. He did not tell anyone to commit a crime. He was not there when people committed crimes. He did not know anyone who committed a crime. And yet they're saying, well, he's not above the rule of law. No, you indicted and want to imprison him for political purposes. And that's the issue. And hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. I've been telling you this for a long time. I've been telling you that this is not going to amount to anything other than an enormous constitutional victory for Trump. Could be 5-4, could be 6-3, who knows? Could even be 7-2, who knows? But they want to rewrite the Constitution, and there's already Supreme Court precedent, Nixon versus V. Fitzgerald. There's other precedent protecting a president from legal liability after his tenure. And so you're not going to imprison Trump on this. He's going to win in November. He's up in every swing state poll. And if media and every single major publication didn't back the Democrat, in this case, 100%, he'd be up by twice as much in the polls. But hit subscribe to this channel right now. We'll listen to Kavanaugh has a really, really good. You know what? Samuel Alito has a very, 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 very good exchange, and they want to rewrite the Constitution. It ain't going to happen. Now, he might be convicted in New York. It'll take 2 years for the Court of Appeals to overturn it. But until then, oh, convicted president, convicted felon, felon, convicted future prisoner, Trump, convicted in a court of law in New York. And the entire planet will laugh, knowing very well that it's meaningless. That everyone knows that Democrats in cities run by the Democratic Party, Tammany Hall, for example, are going after the direct political rivals like tyrants, like despots, like authoritarians, like the totalitarians they're afraid Trump will be. See, they project. They go after Trump in the most tyrannical manner, and then they say, "Oh, he's going to do that to us." It's like, well, you know what? You have utilized lawfare against this man, and you very likely engaged in graft and bribery schemes where 50 intel officials said, no, it was a Kremlin plot yet again to inform you of Hunter's laptop. Anyway, hit subscribe. Check this out. This is Justice Alito. They will send this back. Trump will dissolve the special counsel when he is president. And this is a huge victory for Trump. The hush money case, he might very well be... it might very well be a mistrial, but it's likely going to be a conviction. We'll see. If it is a conviction, they'll try to get every ounce of public relations, and it'll only the opposite will take place. His poll numbers will go up because you couldn't find a more corrupt, you couldn't find more overtly partisan and political prosecutors than the people going after Trump. But here's Justice Alito. This is a huge, huge, huge victory for Trump.
Presidents have to make a lot of tough decisions about enforcing the law, and they have to make decisions about questions that are unsettled, and they have to make decisions based on the information that's available. Do you really, did I understand you to say, well, if he makes a mistake, he makes a mistake. He's subject to the criminal laws just like anybody else? You don't think he's in a peculiarly precarious position?
He's in a special position for a number of reasons. One is that he has access to legal advice about everything that he does. He's under a constitutional obligation he's supposed to be faithful to the laws of the United States and the Constitution of the United States. And making a mistake is not what lands you in a criminal prosecution. There's been some talk about the statutes that are issued in this case. I think they are fairly described as malum in se statutes, engaging in conspiracies to defraud the United States.
He did nothing of the sort. He had every right to contest a very bizarre contest. He had every single right. It's not a fact set in stone that everything was fair and square. Yes, Biden won. There was not one investigation that truly forced people to go to Congress to testify under oath, for example. Trump did not get the luxury of the Mueller probe. There was not a Mueller probe style investigation for any of his claims. They were debunked immediately by people at the county level, by journalists, by people who were tabulating, and that's it. Debunked. That's it. We spoke to the person. We spoke to the person at the county, at the city, at the state. We spoke. Everything was fine. You were wrong. And that's it. That's the extent of how they debunked everything. We spoke to this person, and Trump was wrong. And he's trying to deceive the public. What's more likely, that Trump was a Russian operative that everyone in the Democratic Party still believes, despite the zero evidence that he ever worked with the Kremlin, zero evidence, despite the Mueller probe finding no evidence, or Trump's opponent who couldn't even put two sentences together without stumbling and bumbling and mumbling about, didn't even campaign, 3 people for speeches here and there, making very bizarre claims about cornflakes and this and that, and making up words and slurring speech. The whole planet knows. I mean, he's like, and pause. I mean, the whole entire world knows. Even the special counsel, stated, yeah, cognitive abilities, he's elderly, we can't indict him. What's more likely? The fact that intel officials who despise Trump claimed that he was an operative of the Kremlin, and people still believe that on the left, or that, you know what, there was some very bizarre things that went on. It was never truly litigated or investigated. He had no time to investigate his claims. The entire media was against him. He didn't have the whole Republican Party, and he had all the Democrats against him. Not for 1 second did Democrats feel that he would actually overturn any results. Lakiva! Thank you, Lakiva! To my super chat, thank you. So what's more likely? And so they say, well, he tried to defraud. How do you know? He never. We still don't have any testimony under oath pertaining to Trump's claims. We have zero Federal Bureau of investigations. We have zero testimony in front of Congress. We have zero testimony under oath. And so because journalists asked people at the county level to debunk Trump's claims, suddenly he's a liar, it's a fact, it's set in stone, and all of his claims are wrong. And he tried to defraud the country, you know. And also you have to prove intent, and he truly this day believes he's right, as do most Republicans, and even a good many Democrats.
With respect to one of the most important functions, namely the certification of the next president?
Well, I don't want to dispute that particular application of 371.
He didn't want to impede any he didn't want to impede any official proceeding. He didn't tell people to commit criminal acts. He said go peacefully. The statute they used, 18 U.S. Code 371, I believe, is a very broad, ambiguous statute. You have to prove intent. You have to prove that other people have the same intent. You have to prove that he knew he was wrong. And there was not one investigation that resulted in anyone testifying under oath. So how on earth do you know categorically Trump is wrong? Again, they went to the county level and they asked people, is Trump right? No, he's wrong. Oh, Trump again. Oh, no, the Trumpers again. Well, we spoke to the county. We spoke to the people counting, and they said that this is complete understandable. Oh, look, you see in that video? Oh, that's not what you really see. Yeah, everything's fine. Debunked. It's debunked. But nobody was testified under oath, under cross-examination. Giuliani, Trump, all of these attorneys, they never got anyone to testify under oath. They never were. That was never even a possibility, which is exactly why all of these defamation suits are taking place.
Conspiracy to defraud the United States to the particular facts here, but would you not agree that that is a peculiarly open-ended?
I'm attorney Ken Nugent. If you've been injured,
prohibition in that fraud under that provision, unlike under most other fraud provisions, doesn't require any impairment of a property interest.
It's designed to protect the functions of the United States government, and it's difficult to think of a more critical function than the certification of who won the election.
Yeah, I'm not, as I said, I'm not discussing.
Democrats tried desperately to stop that from taking place in 2016. It's so funny how they're such hypocrites. It's unbelievable. There was even a public service announcement asking for the official procedures or procedural, let's just say activities for algorithmic sake. There was a public service announcement with Hollywood celebrities begging, "Oh, don't let the U.S. government, allow Trump to be president." And this is after they railroaded Bernie Sanders.
The particular facts of this case, but it applies to any fraud that interferes seriously with any government operation, right?
So what the government needs to show is an intent to impede, interfere, or defeat a lawful government function by deception, and it has to be done with scienter. These are not the kinds of activities that I think any of us would think a president needs to engage in order to fulfill his article.
Why not? Why not? If you have a DNC primary on a massive scale, you don't think a president has the authority and the responsibility to make sure that things are the opposite of 2016 DNC primary mode? You don't think that people should, you don't think that if he truly believed that he was railroaded, that he should actually try to set the record straight, like correct the record? Literally an organization that had fake and phony profiles on Twitter to go after Clinton and the DNC's political opponents. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. Everything is sanctimonious. Oh, who would ever do that? You did that in 2016. The hush money case is still litigating Trump's defeat of Clinton. There's still the whole argument with the hush money case in New York is that Trump cheated. That's literally the argument. Even though the FEC fined the DNC and Clinton for purchasing the Steele dossier, a complete set of lies that government agencies use to investigate Trump.
Article 2 duties, and particularly in a case like this one, I want to pick up on something that the court said earlier about the distinction between a public official acting to achieve public ends and a public official acting to achieve private ends. As applied to this case, the president has no functions with respect to the certification of the winner of the presidential election. It seems likely that the framers designed the Constitution that way because at the time of the founding, presidents had no two-term limit. They could run again and again, and were expected potentially to want to do that. So the potential for self-interest would explain why the states conduct the elections. They send electors to certify who won those elections and to provide votes, and then Congress in a extraordinary joint session certifies the vote. And the president doesn't have an official role in that proceeding. So it's difficult for me to understand how there could be a serious constitutional question about saying you can't use fraud to defeat that function. You can't obstruct it through deception. You can't.
What deception? What deception? You debunked Trump based on what? Based on county level officials, state level officials saying Trump is lying, and then every publication on the planet, Trump is lying. We spoke to the county official. His claims make no sense. Debunked. How dare you, Trump, try to deceive the nation? Oh, you knew it. You must have known how wrong you were. I mean, everyone is saying you're wrong. Therefore, he probably knew he was. All of this whole time, he knew he was wrong. I mean, nobody with a functioning brain cell could have believed Trump, except most of the Republican Party does. Anyone with a functioning brain cell actually can state, you know what? It's very bizarre. Of course, Biden won, and Trump lost. How we got to that point is up for debate. In a rational and intelligent and logical manner, you can say, okay, there's more evidence that Trump's claims are rational than there is that the Democratic claims that Trump was a Kremlin operative. They literally used a compilation of lies to investigate Trump. Like, literally, the Steele dossier was only lies. And then they say, oh, they're the ones who, 18 U.S. Code 371, I wrote about this in the Federalist. They're the ones who should be indicted on that statute. Okay, where was Trump's Steele dossier when it came to his claims in 2020? Oh, that's right. He didn't have any. He just had he was up and then down, and everyone was like, what happened? And a lot of things took place that were very bizarre. Things that never happened before in the history of this country. So do we have direct evidence that it was stolen from him? No, we don't. Was anyone forced to testify under oath, which would then make their claims that Trump lied and deceived and that his claims were debunked? Perhaps testifying under oath would give people a bit of an incentive to tell a little bit more of the truth than just simply, Trump was wrong. Like the video footage, for example, if you had anyone testifying, lots of video footage, if you had people testifying under oath in a cross-examination, maybe their story would be different. Who knows? He never got that luxury, and he was never going to. Again, Trump is a brilliant man, but there was a problem. He was very naive towards the end. His last year in office, letting bureaucrats take over with these press conferences where he was made to look like, oh, we're really listening to Trump. Oh my God. And then, the bureaucrats that were given a platform by Trump turned on him even during the press conferences. I mean, he should never have given, and it's like he did things. Unfortunately, he was naive towards the end of his presidency. And he should never even have had that day in January. Okay, the 6th. He should never have had that day. You had an entire summer of billions in property damage and 14,000 arrests. You were never going to get the benefit of the doubt. There could have been that chaos and mayhem could not have happened. It could have been like 10 arrests, and it'd be like, oh my God, 10 arrests, five blocks from the building. Oh no, the Trump. They would have sensationalized everything. The average liberal Democrat doesn't even remember the boarded up buildings in flames, cars in flames, injured officers throughout the country, curfews. They don't remember that. They just like, oh, that's nothing to do with it. It was for a righteous cause. And I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated, but not the property damage, not the lives lost. But that one day, suddenly law enforcement's very important to Democrats. And oh, by the way, the people who lost their lives that day were supporters of Trump. And then there was a terrible, it was a couple days after, an officer lost his life. And then you heard lies about what took place pertaining to that initially. And that's terrible. The loss of life of the officer, the loss of life of the unarmed woman. Where are these liberal Democrats who care so much about unarmed protesters? Where are they when you have a loss of life of women, and unarmed women? But anyway, let's continue.
Can't deprive millions of voters of their right to have their vote counted.
Oh, you mean like the Colorado ban? You mean like the Colorado ban that was overturned unanimously?
For the candidate who they chose.
Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas? Justice Alito?
Could we just briefly review the layers of protection that you think exists? And I'm going to start with what the D.C. Circuit said. So the first layer of protection is that attorneys general and other Justice Department attorneys can be trusted to act in a professional and ethical manner, right?
Yes.
How robust is that protection? I mean, most of the vast majority of attorneys general and Justice Department attorneys, and we both served in the Justice Department for a long time, are honorable people, and they take their professional ethical responsibilities seriously. Mm-hmm. But there have been exceptions, right? Both among attorneys general and among federal prosecutors.
There have been rare exceptions, Justice Alito, but when we're talking about layers of protection, I do think this is the starting point. And if the court has concerns about the robustness of it, I would say.
So the special counsel already lost the argument. The conservative justices, and even maybe the liberal ones, already know that there's bias and animus and vitriol and venom towards Trump. They already know that the DOJ doesn't like Trump. I mean, you're not fooling anyone. So you can't just simply say he's not protected as president. He's no different than any other citizen, although the average citizen is not the president of the United States. But aside from that, You can't just simply say that his acts are not protected, even though a speech, for example, is absolutely protected. And his speech, there was literally nothing wrong with that speech. Nothing. He never told anyone to commit a crime. And that is protected under the constitutional protections of that a president enjoys.
I suggest looking at the charges in this case.
Well, I want to talk about this in the abstract, because what is before us, of course, does involve this particular case, which is immensely important. But whatever we decide is going to apply to all future presidents. So as for attorneys general, there have been 2 who were convicted of criminal offenses while in office. There were others. A. Mitchell Palmer's one that comes to mind, who is widely regarded as having abused the power of his office. Would you agree with that?
But they are 2 officials in a long line of attorneys generals who did not, and in departments of justice that are staffed by multiple people who do adhere to their office. And Justice Alito, if I
That's not a rebuttal. That's not a rebuttal to what Justice Alito is saying. It's not a rebuttal. How is that a rebuttal? The point is, it doesn't matter if it's mostly peaceful or mostly wonderful attorney generals. You still could have, potentially this one, potentially, just maybe Biden's attorney general, just maybe, like the 2 others that Justice Alito referred to, maybe could be doing things that aren't above board or legal. So you just indict somebody and say, well, because we indicted him, therefore he's no longer president? Are you kidding me?
the point that I wanted to make about this case does go to the general proposition. The allegations about the misuse of the Department of Justice to perpetuate election fraud show exactly how the Department of Justice functions in the way that it is supposed to. Petitioner is alleged to have tried to get the Department of Justice to send fraudulent letters to the states to get them to reverse electoral results.
There's no such thing as a fraudulent letter. What he wanted, Trump, was people to testify under oath. He was not able to get that. He was never going to be able to get that. And he had legitimate questions as to how results were derived. None of these questions or claims that Trump made were categorically debunked in a court of law. Or at least they were debunked. They were struck down in courts of laws, for sure. But there was no the people involved in tabulating, the people involved at the county or state level were never brought to Congress or to a court of law to testify under oath regarding how they derived their conclusions, let's say.
I understand that, Mr. Dreeben, but as I said, this case will have effects that go far beyond this particular prosecution. So moving on to the second level of protection that the D.C. Circuit cited, federal grand juries will shield former presidents from unwarranted indictments. How much protection is that?
Well, it affords 2 levels of protection. One is the probable cause finding requires evidence. I think some of the fears about groundless prosecutions aren't supported by evidence, and they're not going to get out of the starting gate.
I mean, there's the old saw about indicting a ham sandwich.
Yes, but I think
you can indict a ham sandwich. You could have indicted Hunter and Joe already. But they just said that, well, no reasonable prosecutor. Or they said 50 intel officials, it was a plot by the Kremlin to inform you of Hunter's obvious graft and bribery schemes in his laptop. So, I mean, they're not buying it. And this is the one case that could derail Trump's campaign. This is the one case that could stop him from becoming president. And this is the case that he's winning outright, even more so than Georgia and Florida, which he's already pretty much won those cases. They were so desperate to try to sling as much mud at Trump, and they can't touch the man, thank God. Number one, because they're so inept, and number two, because he didn't commit a crime. So, and they're saying, oh, well, there's enough evidence. There's evidence to indict Joe right now based on Hunter's emails, but they won't do it. And the special counsel said, well, he's elderly. And a jury and a court would just say he's a well-meaning elderly man who didn't intend to do anything wrong. So you can indict. These are politically motivated prosecutions. When Democrats convince themselves about the rule of law, it's like when they look in the mirror and say, oh, I'm a morally superior Democrat. As they say hashtag wrong Trump when Trump's brother passed away. You're talking about the most vile people in certain cases. The most vile, venomous, mean, angry individuals. And then they say Trump supporters are, they're out there. It's like, no, you've never seen. I was on the left for most of my life. I know. The leftists go after themselves with a lot more fury and anger and vitriol and venom than they do even Trump.
I mean, you had a lot of experience in the Justice Department. You come across a lot of cases where the U.S. attorney or another federal prosecutor really wanted to indict a case and the grand jury refused to do so.
There are such cases. Yes. But I think that the other
Every once in a while there's an eclipse too.
Well, I think that's for the most reason is prosecutors have no incentive to bring a case to a grand jury and secure an indictment when they don't.
Once in a while there's an eclipse.
Don't have evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's self-defeating.
All right, then the third level is that former presidents enjoy all the protections afforded all criminal defendants, right? And we've discussed that. And that may be true at the end of the day, but a lot can happen between the time when an indictment is returned and the time when the former president finally gets vindication, perhaps on appeal. Isn't that correct?
It is correct, Justice Alito, but I think that we should also consider the history of this country. As members of the court have observed, it's baked into the Constitution that any president knows that they are exposed to potential criminal prosecution. My friend says after impeachment and conviction, we don't read the impeachment judgment clause that way, but it's common ground that all former presidents have known that they could be indicted and convicted. And Watergate cemented that understanding. The Watergate smoking gun tape involved President Nixon and H.R. Haldeman.
Watergate was a break-in. A break-in is a felony. Burglary is a felony. A speech that Trump performed a speech. If there was no criminal conduct, they would not have indicted Trump for performing a speech. What they said, which is this really stupid form of logic, it's completely irrational. Trump's speech made people lose their impulses. His inability to accept righteous and good and decent results made people lose their will to see the truth. It got them angry. It made them try to rebel against the country. Notice they don't use the I word anymore. They don't use the I word anymore after they got completely humiliated by a unanimous Supreme Court decision. They were saying up until recently he was going to try to rebel against the country. They don't say that anymore. I wonder why.
Talking about and then deciding to use the CIA to give a bogus story to the FBI to shut down a criminal investigation.
I mean, Mr. Sauer and others have identified events in the past where presidents have engaged in conduct that might have been charged as a federal crime, and you say, well, no, that's not really true. This is.
But Nixon did commit crimes, though. Okay, I believe it was John Dean who then turned on Nixon, who then now liberals love. It was paying people. He was paying people as part of the plot to protect the president. I believe. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. In the comments, in the chat, in the comments section, let me know. In the live chat, let me know. Okay, but I believe John Dean was literally paying people on behalf of Nixon. Okay, what Nixon did was try to cover up a break-in. He might have even known about the break-in. I don't know if he knew, but where is these people Nixon knew, the plumbers were part of part of the executive branch, at least in terms of Nixon trying to cover up what took place. Trump did not know the people committing crimes, and the people committing crimes did not use a defense that Trump told them to do anything. So then how is Trump going to be in prison for what they did?
Page 42 of your brief. So what about President Franklin D. Roosevelt's decision to intern Japanese Americans during World War II? Couldn't that have been charged under 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against civil rights?
Today, yes, given this court's decision in Trump versus United States, in which Trump versus Hawaii, where the court said Korematsu is overruled. I mean, President Roosevelt made that decision with the advice of his Attorney General. That's a layer of safeguard.
Is that really true? I thought Attorney General Biddle thought that there was really no threat of sabotage, as did J. Edgar Hoover.
So I think that there is a lot of historical controversy, but it underscores that occurred during wartime. It implicates potential commander-in-chief concerns about the exigencies of national defense that might provide an as-applied Article II challenge at the time. I'm not suggesting today, but the idea that a decision that was made and ultimately endorsed by this court, perhaps wrongly, in the Korematsu case, would support criminal prosecution under 241, which requires under United States versus Lanier that the right have been made specific so that there is notice to the president. I don't think that would have been satisfied.
All right, well, we could go through other historical examples. I won't do that. Let me just touch briefly on a couple of other things. One is the relevance of advice of counsel, and I wasn't clear what your answer is. So if the president gets advice from the Attorney General that something is lawful, is that an absolute defense?
Who cares if he gets advice from the Attorney General? Usually a president has an Attorney General that works for him, that will try to implement his politics. Unlike Trump, who had Jeff Sessions, the worst Attorney General in the history of mankind, and then William Barr, who was like, okay here and there with the Mueller probe, but then didn't want anything to do with, finding out potential truth, possible reality regarding his last year in office. So Trump didn't have an administration that actually backed his view of the world. Okay? The biggest mistake Trump made was initially abandoning Mike Flynn. That was the biggest mistake initially that he made. So I hope he gets full. It'd be amazing if he got full immunity. I think that he'll get partial immunity, but I do agree. He's going to get. This is a huge victory for Trump because what Democrats are doing is they're putting all their eggs in one basket saying, oh, you know what? Let's try our best to just change the Constitution forever. At least we'll get Trump, he won't win again. But see, again, Trump comes in, he's like an Andrew Jackson when it comes to upending the system. So Trump comes in and you know what? He's going to get that Attorney General eventually that he wants. He's going to get that National Security Advisor. He's going to get that the Intel chiefs will then say, okay, you know what? He's a second two-term president. The political winds are going towards this man. And then Democrats will say, oh, it's politicized. Everything's politicized. Then they'll say, oh, you know what? Government stinks. When they say, oh, Trump tried to break norms and traditions.
Yes, I think that it is under the principle of entrapment by estoppel. This is a due process doctrine that we referred to in our brief, our reply brief in Garland versus Cargill this term at page 19, where we cited authority of this court that if a authorized government representative tells you that what you are about to do is lawful, it would be a root violation of due process to prosecute you for that.
So all he needed was William Barr to tell him that what he was doing was lawful and then he wouldn't be prosecuted. I don't think that was going to take place. They would have gone after William Barr also. So he had every right to do what he did. And he, not for 1 second did any Democrat on this planet believe that he would actually remain in office. They were the same people who wanted you to hide and never speak to a person again in your life, were drinking champagne on CNN when Mashed Potato Brains won, and passing it around as they demanded you did a million different things to have eggs and coffee at a diner. So you're talking about the biggest hypocrites on the planet.
Won't that give presidents an incentive to be sure to pick an attorney general who will reliably tell the president that it is lawful to do whatever the president wants to do if there's any possibly conceivable argument in favor of it?
So I think the constitutional structure protects against that risk. The president nominates the attorney general, and the Senate provides advice and consent. And these are the sort of structural checks that have operated for 200 years to prevent the kind of abuses that my friend fears going forward as a result of this once-in-history prosecution.
On the question of whether a president has the authority to pardon himself, which came up earlier in the argument, what's the answer to that question?
I don't believe the Department of Justice has taken a position. The only authority that I'm aware of is a member of the Office of Legal Counsel wrote on a memorandum that there is no self-pardon authority. As far as I know, the department has not addressed it further, and of course this court had not addressed it either.
Well, when you addressed that question before us, are you speaking in your capacity solely as a member of the special counsel's team, or are you speaking on behalf of the Justice Department, which has institutional responsibilities?
I am speaking on behalf of the Justice Department, representing the United States.
Now, how don't you think we need to know the
Biden administration? Because when Trump, his Justice Department, is never the United States. It was the Trump. It was the minions, the henchmen of Trump. But with Biden, it's essentially the United States. I mean, obviously, that's what the DOJ is always the U.S. versus But I love that.
The answer to at least to the Justice Department's position on that issue in order to decide this case, because if a president has the authority to pardon himself before leaving office, and the DC Circuit is right that there is no immunity from prosecution, won't the predictable result be that presidents on the last couple of days of office are going to pardon themselves from anything that they might have been conceivably charged with committing?
I really doubt that, Justice Alito. I mean, it sort of presupposes a regime that
a president that wins after his predecessor can indict the predecessor for anything. There used to be, when President Obama and his intel agencies went after Trump, that broke the peaceful transfer of power. They accused an incoming president of being an operative of the Kremlin. You would have to be a very stupid, naive person to believe that. But we have a lot of intelligent people who lack wisdom, who still think to this day that Trump, the Kremlin. And yet they used a dossier that was literally purchased, and the FEC fined Democrats. The FEC didn't find Trump, but of course, New York went after Trump. But there's nothing protecting. Trump could have indicted President Obama. President Obama could have and would have had perhaps grounds to indict Bush. Okay, Bush could have indicted Clinton if he wanted to, I guess. So, you know, it's a very murky, sad, pathetic, dangerous new state of affairs. Because that's all Democrats have. You think they're going to say the economy, foreign policy is fantastic? Everything's crumbling. The entire world is crumbling now because there's a lack of vision. There's no vision. There's no vision in foreign policy. There's no vision in economic policy. Democrats govern through media and public relations. I mean, even the public relations, they govern through a very bizarre adherence to ideology. Very warped ideology.
We have never had, except for President Nixon and as alleged in the indictment here, presidents who are conscious of having engaged in wrongdoing and seeking to shield themselves. I think the political consequences of a president who asserted a right of self-pardon.
Trump has never admitted, nor is he conscious of wrongdoing. If anyone on this planet is sure of himself, it's this man right here, Trump. There's not 1 second that he believes that mashed potato brains truly defeated him. Now, again, Biden won. The question is, has there ever been anyone under oath in a cross-examination being forced to tell the truth regarding what took place? No. So there you go.
That has never been recognized, that seems to contradict a bedrock principle of our law that no person shall be the judge in their own case. Those are adequate deterrents, I think, so that this kind of dystopian regime is not going to evolve.
All right, let me end with just a question about what is required for the functioning of a stable democratic society, which is something that we all want. I'm sure you would agree with me that a stable democratic society requires that a candidate who loses an election, even a close one, even a hotly contested one, leave office peacefully if that candidate is the incumbent.
Of course.
All right. Now, if an incumbent who
Trump left office peacefully, he didn't tell anyone to commit crimes. He didn't convince anyone or compel anyone to commit a crime. None of the people indicted by the DOJ in January ever said that Trump told them to do anything. So how did he not leave peacefully? The man left. The man said, what Trump's biggest mistake was believing that his supporters could demonstrate in the manner Democrats demonstrated all throughout the summer. It was never going to happen. It was never going to happen.
Who loses a very close, hotly contested election knows that a real possibility after leaving office is not that the president is going to be able to go off into a peaceful retirement, but that the president may be criminally prosecuted by a bitter political opponent. Will that not lead us into a cycle that destabilizes the functioning of our country as a democracy? And we can look around the world and find countries where we have seen this process, where the loser gets thrown in jail.
So I think it's exactly the opposite, Justice Alito. There are lawful mechanisms to contest the results in an election, and outside the record, but I think of public knowledge, petitioner and his allies filed dozens of electoral challenges, and my understanding is lost all but one that was not outcome determinative in any.
So there you go. What did this man do? The special counsel even admits he went to court. He didn't tell anyone to commit a crime. That's the thing. This is a huge victory for Trump. I've been telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the whole time, look, hit subscribe to this channel. We're going to enjoy a very beautiful, hopefully a beautiful time in American history. It really depends, ladies and gentlemen, how apoplectic, and let's just say apoplectic, hysterical, angry, mean, the wonderful, morally superior, highly educated Democrats get. Their only strategy to combat Trump is meltdown and hope that people get tired of their insane meltdown regarding Trump. That's the only strategy, because they can't just take the L, say, okay, let's have a good economy, a good foreign policy with Trump. Just take the L, and maybe 4 years from now come back. It's, oh my God, resistance number 2. Oh, an anonymous person told the Times that they're protecting the country from Trump. It's like, look, they've created somebody that isn't Trump, and they think that person is going to devour the country. It's completely irrational. The average, I should say, a great many liberal Democrats are completely irrational and just basically apoplectic when it comes to the subject of Trump. They can't take the L. They can't accept they lost in 2016, as they condemn him for not accepting that he lost. And the difference is you had very bizarre anomalies take place when he lost. And when they lost in 2016, they accused Trump of being a Kremlin operative, which is a categorical lie. So, anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. We're going to be, November is going to be a very important month. A very important month in the history of the United States of America, and I'm honored and privileged to share it with you, with my viewers in Australia, Nicholas, Paul Bartlett, everyone here in Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Korea, Sweden, UK, Canada, New Zealand, everywhere in the world, Nigeria, everyone watching, Nepal, thank you so very, very much. God bless you. Be here in November and beyond. We're going to get to 300,000 subs, hopefully before November. And what can I tell you? Hit subscribe, share this everywhere. Huge victory for Trump. Thanks, everybody. God bless.